Hi everyone, it's Emma here, and this week I am talking through 5 reasons to cut back on caffeine during your period. So yeah, as a nutritionist, caffeine is quite an interesting one. I think nowadays in our kind of modern, hectic society, caffeine is something that we can quite often get quite reliant on. And especially if we are struggling with other symptoms such as those of PMS, and we feel we need a pick-me-up, sometimes caffeine can be a bit of a go-to. So today I'm just trying to talk through some of the processes that caffeine is involved in and perhaps why it might not be so positive, so helpful when it comes to monthly symptoms. So yeah, I'm just going to run through some of the reasons why we might want to double think or rethink caffeine and perhaps some alternatives. So when we talk about caffeine, we might think about how much is too much. So if you read online kind of general guidelines, a lot of the time we make reference to 400 milligrams of caffeine, which is relative to about 4 cups of coffee. So coffee tends to be your kind of strongest source of caffeine compared to teas, but also there's fizzy juice options that have caffeine and even chocolate in a very small amount. So it can build up during the day, and also what I would say is it's very individual. Our tolerance to caffeine is very individual and how we process it and break it down. So as always, for me, it's trying to consider yourself as an individual and just really looking at your own response to caffeine, and hopefully we'll talk through a few symptoms that might make you more aware of that. So first of all, quite an obvious one would be sleep. And sleep is absolutely essential, especially when we're talking about energy levels. So if someone says they're looking to boost their energy or they're struggling with energy levels, sleep is one of the first things that I want you to consider. So as with monthly symptoms, they can be quite varied, and energy dips and trouble with energy and sleep separately can often be an issue. So this is definitely one to consider, but this might be partly the reason that we would turn to caffeine in the first place, for that energy hit, and I just want to explain a little bit about how that could potentially be detrimental. So first of all, you've got these changes in hormones which are affecting your energy levels anyway, but then when we're looking at caffeine as an energy source, what we need to realise is that it's a very short-term source of energy. So caffeine kind of ignites your stress response, and what it does is it makes your blood sugar, your blood glucose levels available as a source of energy. But unfortunately, this doesn't last very long, and soon we get these peaks and troughs in your blood sugar levels. So although we might get an initial hit, an initial rise in blood sugar, that will eventually drop off. So that's a kind of direct response in terms of your energy levels at that time. But we also need to think indirectly how caffeine during the day could actually affect your sleep. And caffeine, again, this is individual, but it can stay in your system for a number of hours. Some research says up to 5 hours, but I've actually seen references saying that it could be up to 10 hours. As I say, this is really individual. So potentially having caffeine as early in the day as lunchtime or very early afternoon could actually still be affecting you by the time you get to go to your bed, and therefore affecting your sleep. So this is just really something to consider in terms of the short-term effects on energy and those longer-term effects on your sleep more generally as well. What I would also say is, I will go on to explore this in more detail as well, caffeine is also a diuretic, and that means that we lose water, but we also lose nutrients. So this would be something, whether you're not having too much caffeine, something like a balanced mineral drink with those added nutrients can be a really helpful step especially if you're struggling with monthly symptoms, but even more so if you've got a bit of a caffeine habit as well. So just to try and put some of those extra key nutrients back in, such as your magnesium, which might drain as a result of caffeine. And remember, magnesium is very good for relaxation, both physically and mentally, and also things like pain perception as well. Next, how caffeine can affect your mood. So this is really interesting. Again, we need to consider our monthly symptoms before we even consider caffeine. So mood swings, low mood, irritability, these might be symptoms that we kind of experience monthly anyway, but then to throw caffeine into the mix, how is that having an effect? Our mood can work very in sync with our blood sugar levels. So just what I was saying about caffeine, how it can cause a spike and then a trough in your blood sugar levels, your mood can actually be quite in sync with this as well. So you might get an initial uplift, but actually that drop in blood sugar can give rise to symptoms such as anxiety, for example. So again, that's just one to consider. Again, your source of caffeine might have a direct effect on this response. So coffee, for example, which is very high in caffeine, can be quite extreme. Whereas if you go for an option such as green tea, there's a little bit of caffeine in there, but there's actually some lovely, gentle, calming amino acids such as L-theanine, which can help to kind of dampen some of the more negative effects of caffeine on your mood. So that's definitely one I would consider. Also, if it's mood more generally, rather than just with the caffeine, we've got remedies such as Avena Cam, Avena Sativa, made from the oat plant. So that might be one to consider as well. Number 3 is caffeine's effect on your digestion. And this for me especially is quite prevalent. It's quite a direct response that we'd want to consider. Caffeine itself is a bit of an irritant, as are some of the ingredients within coffee, not necessarily just the caffeine. These may be independent effects as seen by research, but also caffeine is igniting your stress response. Unfortunately, we know that in that stress response, your digestion somewhat shuts down. So again, if you are likely to experience digestive symptoms anyway as a result of these fluctuating hormones around the time of your period, caffeine could potentially be making those symptoms even worse. So definitely one to consider there as well. Number 4, I kind of mentioned this in terms of the dehydration. So we talk about how being properly hydrated is so important anyway for every system of your body, your digestion, but especially during the time of your period, to help support your circulation, support lovely blood circulation to the womb, to take those lovely nutrients to the womb and take any waste products away, such as the prostaglandins, which can give rise to discomfort and the cramps we might experience. So caffeine is a diuretic, we're losing our nutrients and it can potentially hinder your circulation. So again, just one to consider in terms of balanced mineral drink and just keeping your water uptake. Again, whether or not you're having caffeine, we want at least 1.5 to 2 litres of water as a minimum, and then any warm drinks on top of that are an extra. And just my final point is back around the nutrients as well. So we've mentioned caffeine being a diuretic, so to keep up with your water intake, but actually at this time of month we might need some extra nutrients anyway. So again, that's where something like your balanced mineral drink. Magnesium in particular is very good for helping your relaxation and your pain responses. Of course, there are other nutrients to consider as well in terms of caffeine. Caffeine, especially caffeinated drinks, including your teas and coffees, contain chemicals called tannins, and this can actually block your absorption of other key nutrients such as iron. Iron is especially important for women who are bleeding each month and are losing that blood and that source of iron. So this is another one to consider, just how many caffeinated drinks you're having and the potential content of the tannins and how that might be affecting your nutrient uptake as a whole. So again, something like the balanced mineral drink might just be helpful just to add a little supplement during this time. You could take something like the balanced drink just in the week of your period if you're feeling a bit more vulnerable, or you could take it all throughout the month. It would certainly be beneficial. But iron is especially one to consider if you are having quite heavy periods each month. So we'd really want to replenish your iron. So through lovely dietary sources or a gentle iron supplement such as Floridix could be an option as well. So I hope that helps. As always, please, I'll make any reference to any products I mentioned in the description. Please leave any comments if you've got any questions. Also, please subscribe to our A.Vogel YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified of any future videos.